Okay, so special cases, horizontal and vertical lines. Okay, so you guys, you should have this, you should already know this in terms of what a horizontal line looks like. If a horizontal line has, and some of you guys said it has no slope to it, there's no rise to it, then it's y equals a constant c value. So if you see like y equals 2 on your homework, y equals -1, I believe was on, after you isolated y, you've got just a constant value left. Then c is a constant, and it's, and when I go to graph it, I would realize that that horizontal line, so think of the steepness of a horizontal line. The steepness is 0. Like what's the grade, when you're going up a road, let's say you're driving up to Big Bear, there's like signs that have like how steep it is, like what percentage. So the percentage of steepness for a horizontal line is 0. So we would say m is equal to 0. Okay, so that's the important thing to keep in mind. And this is for, should have said horizontal here, horizontal lines. And then for vertical lines, okay, you guys, so in the chat, if horizontal is y equals c, what does a vertical line, the equation of a vertical line, look like? Good, and more people type it in, please, so I have, and if you guys can type it privately so I can see that other people will be encouraged to respond if the answer isn't there. And if you don't have it, and again, I think someone else mentioned they can't find their graphic organizer, just jot this down into notes somewhere on a sheet of paper. Thank you. So it is x equals c. And I don't know how many of you guys remember, but when you have a vertical line, so think of skiing. It's possible for you guys to ski off like what's it called? The Black Diamond slope, where it's super, super steep. But as soon as it's like this, nobody skis off of that. So think of it as it's an undefined slope. So slope on this one is, so slope is, where c is still a constant, and m is what we call undefined. So I know your teachers here at Fountain Valley High School and across the district will agree with me to say that slope is either 0 or undefined. Don't say that it has no slope, or what's some other phrases I've heard. Like, don't say no slopes. If you mean slope is equal to 0, say 0 and not no slope. Okay, so then the other two columns are going to be where we're going to have a bit more notes, is the parallel and perpendicular lines. Does anyone have questions on horizontal and vertical lines? I'm not going to graph it because I'm going to assume you guys know how to graph horizontal and vertical lines. All right, you guys, so in this column here, we're now going to do parallel lines. If you did not know that those double bars mean parallel, go ahead and put parallel in parentheses. And that's actually the remainder part of our of Unit 2 will be on parallel lines as it pertains to geometry. So we're going to talk about some of the vocab words that you guys have already learned in middle school. That I know from last year. I had asked the kids about that. Okay, so in algebra though, can you guys just in the chat privately to me jot or type out some things that you know about lines that are parallel from what you learned from algebra? Some like characteristics. And if you guys can try to change that to a private setting if you're currently sending it out to everyone. Good. Okay, so I'll say that, okay, some people put never intersecting, which is true. In order for them never to intersect or never touch, certain features have to be true, and someone wrote they have the same slope. So let's go with that. So key characteristics are they have the same slope. So 2 lines you're given, so I'm looking at your quiz next week and it says, are these lines parallel or perpendicular? You guys would identify what the slope is, and if they have the same slope and different y-intercepts, then we would say that they are parallel. Okay, let me ask you guys back and type it into the chat again privately. Why would it, why does the different y-intercept have to be true? Why can't it have the same slope and the same y-intercept? Why do we add that? Okay, good. If we have the same slope and the same y-intercept, then it would be the same line. So very good. It wouldn't make sense for it to be parallel lines because they would be the equations of the same line. So my example to you guys for this one is one of writing equations. And if I can pinpoint something Algebra 2 trig teachers, EQ1 is equation of a line parallel to 3x minus 2y equals 6. Let me finish this and then I give my little speech about the importance of this equation. Okay, I'll read it out loud to you guys now. So write the equation of a line parallel to 3x minus 2y, and that passes through -2, -4. In this section, I would say that these types of questions for students are among the hardest for many students to do, because you have to understand the concept of 3x minus 2y is a separate line, and then they're asking you guys to find the equation of a different line that passes through -2, -4 that is parallel to the first line. Okay, so for some people that just like they don't understand that physically. So again, you're given the equation of one line, which I'll highlight, this first line. So what we need to do is, if we know that it has to have the same slope as that line, we can easily find out what the slope is by solving for or isolating y. So if I can have you guys now take that equation, and can you guys isolate y and type into the chat privately what you get for the slope, just so I can see. And I'd like everyone to do that so I can see how you guys are doing on just that concept. Find the slope of this line. Okay, good so far, people typing it into the chat. Just one note I'm going to make, and I'll come back to that when I go over your homework questions later, is that as you guys do these problems, when you isolate, so I subtracted 2x and I'm isolating y by dividing by -2. I saw some people, and I talked about this in the chat, just divide like the 6 by -2 and not the 3. Not the -3. So when you divide that step of the division, you're going to make sure if you have 3 terms across the equal sign, that you divide each and every one of those terms by -2. So very nice. You guys have, it reduces down to +3/2. And so the next step is the one that here's where now as a Calc BC student or teacher, I'm seeing a lot of Fountain Valley School District kids coming to us with knowing like y equals mx plus b really well. But when you get to Calc BC, the steps that you take to find, like plug in m, plug in x and y to find b, we find that there's a lot more mistakes that occur just with arithmetic in doing that than using point slope form. So in calculus, the main form of the equation of a line is point slope form. So I want you guys to practice with that. So even if you're like used to doing y equals mx plus b, when you're asked for the equation of a line, please, from in this class and going forward, use point slope form. So how do you guys go about doing that? So you have a point given to you guys right here. Okay, that point you guys are going to label x1, y1, and then you have this slope right here. So if the line is parallel to the line highlighted in yellow, then we would use that coordinate point and that same slope. Okay, so here we go. The equation itself is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I'm going to highlight the spots where you guys would have numbers plugged in. Okay, so the y1 we saw was -4. So when I plug it in, it's y minus a -4 equals, the slope is 3/2, x minus a -2, and make sure you guys have parentheses around those negative numbers. And then from there, we're going to write it as y plus 4, the double negatives simplified to positive. And in calculus, if it's a free response question, I keep telling my kids, leave your answer in point slope form. Okay, so we're so trained in Algebra 1 to now switch it to slope intercept form. I would read the directions, make sure it says that it wants you to do that, but this is an acceptable form for the equation of a line. And in calculus, I have to untrain the kids to like make sure that they are just good with leaving it there. Because if they get that correct, but then they solve it the rest of the way to y equals mx plus b, and it's wrong, then we would have a mistake with it would be marked incorrect on a free response. You can. Yeah, and Johnny asked, why can't you just make it y plus 4, x plus 2? I just added that extra step to see where everything was coming. Not everybody sees that right away. So let's say that, and a lot of the, in Algebra 1 geometry, maybe Algebra 2 trig, they do ask you guys to solve for y equals mx plus b. So I'm just going to go through that process to make sure that you guys know how to do that. But again, read the directions. If it says leave in point slope form, you're done. If it says slope intercept, we're going to go ahead and distribute. So 3 halves x plus 3, and then minus the 4. In minusing, you guys are solving an equation, so you just subtract the 4 only to the 3 or the like term. Sometimes I see people subtracting it to the 3 halves x, which doesn't make sense. But your equation in slope intercept form, again, I would read the directions, make sure that it does say slope intercept form before performing the last 3 steps. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? And some of the questions are easier than that. They just say, are the lines parallel or perpendicular or neither? And so now you guys know if it has the same slope, then they are parallel to each other. Okay, last column. I'm gonna actually introduce a word that I didn't know if it was or was not discussed with my kids when they got to me in Calc PC, but for you guys to hear it now, it would be useful for you guys to know that vocab word. So one, on the last test, some of you guys were like, what's that upside down T mean? Does anyone know, what does that mean? What is that symbol that upside down? Yes, okay, it forms a 90-degree angle. It's perpendicular lines. Okay, so we will, let's go ahead and put perpendicular. Another word for perpendicular lines is normal lines. So it's like find a line normal to the initial line means find the line perpendicular to. So we're going to add that vocab word underneath that so that you see it now. And when you guys get to calculus, because you guys, that if you follow the track, you guys would end up in calculus your senior year, is normal for at least my freshman. Okay, so perpendicular, normal. And so starting with features, can someone type in the chat, or can you guys all type in the chat it privately again? What do you guys know about perpendicular lines from Algebra 1? What's the relationship? And I know you guys had a few homework questions on it last night. How are lines perpendicular related to each other? Good, Cody? Okay, so I'm just gonna come across some things like they meet at a point is one of the responses, but algebra-wise, more specific, and then someone wrote they intersect at a 90-degree angle, which is true. So I think algebra-wise, that's kind of like the geometry behind it. Intersect with 90-degree angle, same thing, that's geometry. So very good. I'm now gonna write out what I see a lot of you guys writing. Slopes. So the slopes, we're going to go back to slopes. So parallel lines have the same slope. The slopes are, some of you guys are writing negative reciprocals, some of you guys are writing opposite reciprocals. So I'm going to keep it at opposite reciprocals. And I'll underline opposite, and then I'll underline reciprocals. Sorry, I ran out of room, so I abbreviated opposite. Okay, so they're two different things. There's a reason why there are 2 words there. So the number one mistake I see, even my calc students, the last quiz they had to write the equation of a line perpendicular to, and so like a quarter of them only did one of these 2 things. Okay, so they just flipped it, or they just made it the opposite in sign. So I clearly here marked and underlined both words because they both mean different things. The opposite means that if one of them is positive in sign, then the other one would be negative. Okay, so that the word opposite means the sign. The reciprocal part of it is, type into the chat, you guys, what's the reciprocal of A over B? Okay, so good. So that means, again, I think some people think the word opposite means reciprocal. The word opposite is referring to the signs. The word reciprocal is referring to what you guys just typed. Okay, you flip the fraction. So make it the opposite and then flip the fraction. Okay, so here we go. Here's the example. So very similar to what we had to the other one. And so I'm going to save just some time by using the same equation. So it's going to say write the equation on a line, which we won't write that direction out, perpendicular to that line that we used in the previous example, 3x minus 2y equals 6. And that passes through negative 3, 6. Okay, so I'm going to say that the first step is you guys finding slope, which we already did in the previous example. So we're going to say that the slope from the initial line is 3x minus 2y, that the slope of the first line is 3 over 2. Can you guys now tell me what is and we'll use this notation, what is the slope of the line perpendicular? What's the slope of the line perpendicular? Again, privately, what is the slope of the line perpendicular? Okay, good. Cody and Kelly. Okay, so again, this problem, good, involves you taking an extra step. When it's parallel, all I would do is just use the same slope. But if it's, Richard, you forgot the opposite part. When it's asking for the slope of the line perpendicular, I'm going to make sure it's the opposite in sign. So since the initial slope is positive, we're going to make this one negative, and then we're going to also flip the 3 over 2 to make it negative 2 over 3. Okay, so then now what we do is we use this slope along with the coordinate point that was provided as our x1, y1. And can I have you guys go ahead and write out what is the point slope form? Write out the point slope form and then double check your answer with mine. So once again, sometimes all the problem asks for is leave your answer in point slope form, in which case you guys would be done at this point. That is the line perpendicular to that first line. If it then said, write the equation of a line. Oh, and you guys, if you could watch where you plug in the, what you plug in for X and what you plug in for Y. So common mistake here that I'm seeing is the negative 3 is an X coordinate. So when we plug it into our point slope form, it should go with the X variable. So it should be X minus a negative 3 and then Y minus a 6. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. I saw one person type it with it swapped. Okay, can I have you guys solve for slope-intercept form now? And then I would just say verify your signs as you guys are doing, as I noticed someone had a different answer. When you guys are distributing, you're distributing that negative 2/3, so it should be negative. And then when you add the 6 on both sides, I think we're making some mistakes here. So you guys, negative 2/3 times 3. Okay, so when you think about multiplying negative 2/3 times 3 over 1, that's negative 6 over 3, or you can reduce the 3 to get just negative 2 as that spot. So that's where I got this negative 2 here. And then to undo the minus 6 on the other side, I'm adding 6 to the like term on the other side. So it should be plus 4 as your y-intercept. Very good. Okay, so again, just does that make sense to you guys? Does anyone have questions on that? Okay, and I was putting together your quiz for next week. At the end of next week is on this stuff. And there's a few that ask you guys, like, is it parallel, perpendicular, or neither? So one, if it's, you guys can jot it down where you have space. Parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Okay, so if it's not currently in slope-intercept form, you guys would go ahead and put it into slope-intercept form. But I wanted to point out this example here and then just ask you guys, if you had to classify whether it's parallel, perpendicular, or neither, what would you guys say those two lines are? Okay, so we have a good chunk of students are getting the correct answer. This is a trick question because you guys will notice that the slope looks like it's really close to being perpendicular. However, it has the reciprocal aspect of the requirement for perpendicular lines satisfied, but they are not opposite in signs. So this is a case where if I were to graph those two lines, they would intersect, but they are not perpendicular. So this is a case of neither. Okay, so just pay attention. You guys want to make sure that it needs to be both opposite and reciprocals for it to be perpendicular. Then you guys can conclude it's perpendicular. Okay, so double check that the signs are opposite and then that the slope itself is reciprocals of each other. Okay, you guys, so I wanted to give you some time